Are you willing to cultivate deeper relationships with people so that you can recognize your shared humanity with them? One way to facilitate this recognition is by listening to people's stories. So I had the opportunity to listen to stories this week. I was invited to speak at Fred Hammer's celebration of life. And so I got to sit with his family and talk to them about Fred's life and their memories and what really made Fred so special. So I learned all kinds of things, and it was wonderful. Fred was such an exciting guy. This gentleman who, most of you are like, who's that? He would come, he would sit toward the back, had kind of strawberry blonde hair, glasses, pretty quiet. But if you engaged him in a conversation, he had an opinion on things, and he wanted to know your opinion. It wasn't just about telling you what he knew, but he would really ask about your life. And Fred loved to travel. Fred's wife, Marie Claire, and Fred had been married for 28 years. In that 28 years, they traveled to all 7 continents. I don't know about you, but I don't know anybody else in my life that has traveled to all 7 continents. Fred was also a great promoter of himself, in a good way. And so one of his little stitches that he always did was he would carry a newspaper with him wherever he traveled. It would be either the Denver Post or the Kearney Hub. The Kearney Hub is a newspaper from Kearney, Nebraska, where he was born and was raised. He loved Kearney, Nebraska. He supported that town even to the day he died. He had just a couple weeks earlier before his death donated 5 acres to the city because they were putting in a new little canoe thing through the canal, and he wanted there to be a place where they could stop in the middle of Kearney and have a picnic area. And so he's donated part of his land there. Always doing things. There's a picture here where he was in Antarctica. With his newspaper, he would hold up the newspaper and smile. He would have this at every trip he went. And then when he came home, he would send that newspaper, whether it was the Denver Post or the Kearney Hub, he would send them his picture and talk about his trip. He was published 7 times in the Denver Post. How many times have you been published? He really promoted himself. He knew how to do it. Listening to his story and in the people sharing about his life, they said he would go and do all this travel. He would collect brochures from all these different places that he went. And then he'd come back and he'd spread out the brochures and tell people all about his trip. And he would say, "You should learn about this." And the whole crowd just busted out laughing. After about the 3rd person that related that same phrase, it dawned on me, I've heard him say that. That was Fred's line. You should learn about this. Whether it was Science of Mind, or whether it was a place he had traveled, or whether it was some book that he'd read. The last time I met with him in the rehab center, he was reading Louise Hay. And he said, "You should read her. You should learn about this." I said, "I have read her. She's great. Did you know she was a Science of Mind minister?" It's like, "I never knew that." It's like, "That's why you love her so much." So Fred was a great traveler. He was a great mind. And I got to hear those stories and see the love that his family and friends had for him. It was a way to see our shared humanity. And I knew that Fred had a shared humanity with the world because of all his travel, because of the way that he would be interested in people. He would ask about their lives. He wanted to know so that he could understand people better. I'm not going backwards here. I have to just show you this There's two things. The Hammer Hotel is over here. The Hammer Hotel is family owned in Kearney, Nebraska. And it has a big hammer on the top of the sign with 3 nails that hold the hammer up. The other thing that I had to be very careful so I didn't laugh out loud, several people shared in his celebration of life about how they knew his whole family. They knew his father, Jack Hammer. I tried to be respectful, and I was glad I was sitting in the back, but they kept calling him Jack Hammer. It wasn't just his father, Jack. It was his father, Jack Hammer. Like, who would do that to their child? Evidently, his parents. Okay, and his famous line, you should learn about this. So it's easy to see people that we love, we know, we're around, and see shared humanity. But what about people that are not close to us? So here's an example. People from Puerto Rico. When their island has been devastated by the hurricane, do we feel any shared humanity there? What I found is that many people didn't even realize Puerto Rico was part of the United States. And how sad. And so recognizing that we are all one, and even if it's not part of the United States, which it is, the universe is one entity, is one system here. And what affects one affects all. So it's important that we learn about one another and that we see how our lives can affect each other. It's the opportunity to recognize that we're all interconnected. Every soul, everything on the planet is interconnected in the wholeness of life and the wholeness of this universe. We can push people away. We can push ideas and thoughts and news out of our minds and hold people at arm's length, so to speak, so that we're kind of deadened or muted to things like this that go on, to people that are struggling. Or we can decide to see our shared humanity. And what is ours to do? Maybe it's simply to offer a prayer. And that vibration can help change. So it's important for us to do what we can. Albert Einstein said, a human being is part of the whole, called by us universe, the part limited to time and space. We experience ourselves, our thoughts and feelings, as something separate from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of consciousness. Are we optically deluded here, thinking that we're separate from others? He goes on to say this delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and to affection for a few persons nearest to us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty. Our task to free ourselves from this prison, to open ourselves to a wider compassion here. Every soul, everything is interconnected. Whether we see it in our families or whether we experience it across different religions, different cultures, different ethnicities, we are all connected. In The Science of Mind, on page 161, Ernest Holmes writes, "There's nothing in the universal order that denies the individual's good or self-expression, so long as such self-expression does not contradict the general good, does not contradict goodness itself." So we can all have our good as long as it's not contradicting someone else's good. He goes on to say, there's nothing in the universe that denies us the right to be happy. Woohoo! Be happy! Yes! if our happiness does not deny or interfere with the general good. The universe remains unlimited, though the whole world has suffered a sense of limitation. So, we think we're limited, and we're not. We are made of DNA, the DNA of God. That's where we come from. And that unlimited source is our life. We can open ourselves up. We're limited only by what our minds will allow us to think, to do, to be. So we want to awaken ourselves to the reality that our goodness is there for us. Good and more good is available at all times. It's us that need to be open to it. Just because there is some distance or some cultural difference with someone else doesn't mean that we're not connected to them. Doesn't mean that what happens to them affects us, or what happens to us wouldn't affect them. It's one universal order, and the whole of humanity reflects on one another. So it's February, and I have been giving you some little snippets of Black History Month and Science of Mind connection here. So for today, I want to talk to you about a man that lived his humanity and his spiritual life. Paul Revere Williams was the first African American to be admitted to the American Institute of Architects. His connection with Science of Mind is that in 1957, Ernest Holmes asked Paul Revere Williams to design Founders Church, the first big church that they were building in Los Angeles. And so Paul Revere Williams came up with this design on the bottom left here, a circular building, and he designed the inside of it. Ernest Holmes looked at his design and said, wow, this is the perfect symbol of wholeness, of unity, and of the unending and all-inclusive power of love. He could see that in this building. I thought, maybe I should tell our search committee. Look for a round building. Paul Revere Williams, and that building was built and was completed in 1960. Paul Revere Williams designed many other buildings in the Los Angeles area, including the iconic LAX Airport Terminal building that's on the top left there. So he was quite the designer. He didn't let people limit him, but he knew that he was part of humanity and that he mattered, and what he could bring to life mattered. Ernest Holmes recognized his shared humanity with this architect, and he recognized that his gifts could help the world. He accepted this gentleman when many others wouldn't accept him because of the color of his skin. So I want to remind you that Ernest has said every human has worth and is an expression of spirit. We talked about that last week. Every human has worth. And that is how we recognize our shared humanity. That's what it brings to us. When we can move past our biases, we can open ourselves to understand others and their journey. So I want to share a final story with you. I got this off of YouTube, and I can't find it again. It's amazing. Spirit does that to me every once in a while. You know, you better pay attention when you see it the first time. But it made such an impression on me about shared humanity and understanding people, moving past our bias here. And so I want to share with you, the story was about this white middle-aged man who had his own business. And I can't remember what the business was, and that's not really important to the story. He hired people in recovery White people, black people, it didn't matter. But people who were in recovery and sober and had a criminal record. Because he wanted to give people another chance where the rest of the world may not give them a chance. He wanted to give them some respect, some dignity for themselves, to create a life. His customer base knew that the employees of this company, many of them had a past. And they did business with this company, many of them because that was the type of business this was, giving people a chance. Well, the owner would go out and meet with different customers and share what they were doing, and he would often take employees with him, and the customers would ask questions of the employees about their work and what they did, and sometimes they'd ask him about their personal journey. This particular time, they had to fly to meet with their customer. And so the owner invited two of his supervisors to go. They had never been in a customer meeting before. The one gentleman had never flown before, was quite nervous about it. It happened to be the guy that was tattooed from the top of his head to his feet. Tattoos everywhere. And he was quite nervous about flying, so the owner talked to him at the airport and engaged him in conversation to distract him. They were able to get on the plane and move through the flight, and things went pretty well. They got to the customer meeting, and that was going well. The customers were asking questions. It looked to the two supervisors like this was a pretty middle-class, upper-class white crowd that they were addressing. Toward the end, after they had shared much of their dealings and what they did, they had asked them a lot of personal questions at this particular meeting. One woman stood and addressed a question to the tattooed man. She said, "You have told us that you have children. I would like to know, what advice do you give to your children? You've had many difficulties in life. What do you tell your children?" The silence was deafening. The man stood with his eyes closed. Then he opened his eyes and tears started to fall. He said, "I tell them, don't do what I have done. Make your life different. Make it better." And the room was silent. This woman looked at him and said, "Why? Why do you not want your children to be like you? You are a loving father. You are providing for your family. You're an example of taking responsibility for your life and your actions. Who could want more for their children than that? I think you should be proud of yourself. And your children should be like you." When we can get past our bias, we can see others that may appear different than us, but we are all the same. That's when we find our shared humanity, and that's when our hearts open with compassion, and we allow life to be good and very good. We allow ourselves to be lifted up and to encourage others on this path. When we can look at everybody with the eyes of God, we can see that there's only one power in the universe, and that is the power of God. That there's only one intelligence, and that's the intelligence of God. And there's only one you, and that is God in you, living through you. You are the DNA of God. You can live the love of God. And it's up to each one of us to do that, to live our shared humanity, to live our acceptance, our unconditional love for the world. Take that challenge to do that this week, and we can make a difference in the world. Let us pray. I know that as we receive this message, we receive what it is that is ours to understand, to connect with, to live from. The idea that we are a shared humanity with all of the universe. That even when people appear different from us, at the core, we are the DNA of God. So thank you. Thank you, Spirit, for helping us to understand that, for helping us to take that in, and to live from that place of truth, knowing that each day we get to be the compassion of Spirit in the world. We get to look at somebody who doesn't want people, their children, to be like them, and we get to say, but you are a loving Father. You are an example of taking responsibility for yourself. You are providing for your family. Yes, you are good. Are we willing to see the good in all people, to share that good, to remind each other that we are God in action? We are love, unending love. I bless each of us as we move into the world this week to be the life of God, to be the love and the joy of Spirit with all we meet, recognizing our shared humanity and that what affects one affects all. And so we share love, to have love affect everyone. I release my word, and together we say,